I didn't even want to be there. It was a Thursday night and I was running on fumes. Work had been relentless all week, back-to-back design revisions, last-minute client changes, and a boss who thought urgent was a personality trait. So when Jade reminded me about the corporate dinner she'd planned, I stared at her for a moment, waiting for her to tell me she was joking. She wasn't. "It's important, Tom," she said that morning while brushing on eyeliner in our bathroom mirror. "Just make an appearance. It'll mean a lot." To her credit, she had told me weeks ago. A joint project between her agency and a new international client. Something about luxury branding and market penetration, the details of which I had only half listened to while she spoke animatedly over dinner one night. It was one of those events with name tags, photo ops, and way too much ego packed into one rented ballroom. By the time I walked through the glass doors of the downtown hotel, I was already regretting it. The room buzzed with energy, a carefully curated blend of jazz, low laughter, and the clinking of expensive glasses. Everyone looked like they were trying just a bit too hard. Jade spotted me and waved from across the room. She was seated at a long table near the center, flanked by her boss, Darren, and some high-ranking execs. She looked radiant in a dark green dress I hadn't seen before, subtle but elegant. I nodded and waved back, but instead of joining her, a hostess led me to a smaller table off to the side, reserved for spouses and guests. I knew maybe one person there, a guy named Sean who worked in IT and once helped me recover a corrupted external drive. Small talk with strangers wasn't my strong suit, so I mostly kept to myself, sipping my drink and picking at a plate of oversauced risotto. From my seat, I had a good line of sight to Jade and her group. I watched her laugh at something Darren said, her hand resting lightly on his arm as she leaned in. Maybe it was just the lighting, but something about it felt off. That's when the bottle showed up. A waiter in a black vest and white gloves emerged from the back with a chilled bottle of Dom Perignon. Not just any champagne, but the champagne. He presented it with ceremony, popped the cork, and poured only 2 glasses. One for Darren, one for Jade. Everyone else had house wine or signature cocktails from the printed menu, which I'd already scanned out of boredom. No Dom listed anywhere. I furrowed my brow. Maybe the agency had splurged for the VIPs? Still, it seemed odd. Jade hadn't mentioned any special guests. Just a work party. A celebration. By 9:30, I'd had enough. My tolerance for fake laughter and recycled work jargon was at its limit, and my headache had blossomed into something floral and persistent. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and made my way to the front. Near the hostess stand was a tall podium with several receipts laid out neatly, some labeled with room numbers, others with last names. I glanced down, looking for the valet claim ticket I thought I had left earlier. I saw something with Jade's agency name and, on impulse, grabbed it, assuming it was connected to our table. I didn't check it until I got to the car. The printout was crisp, fancy header, hotel logo, dated for that same night. Room 4205, Executive Suite. Check-in time listed as 8:15 p.m. It detailed a reservation for 2 guests. In-room dining, chocolate souffle for 2, strawberries, and, of course, a bottle of Dom Perignon vintage. My stomach flipped. My first instinct was confusion, not suspicion. Maybe it was a client suite? Maybe someone else from the agency had booked it? But then I saw the billing info. Jade's department listed under corporate account, Jade M/brand strategy. When I walked into the house later, Jade was already home. She was in the kitchen, reheating something in the microwave, humming under her breath. Her dress was gone, replaced by yoga pants and one of my old sweatshirts. She looked casual, normal. "How was the dinner?" she asked, without turning around. "Loud," I replied, setting my keys in the dish by the door. "You get home fast." "Carpool," she said. "Darren dropped me off." I nodded. I didn't mention the bottle of Dom. Not yet. Instead, I pulled out the folded receipt from my jacket and placed it on the counter beside her. "What's this?" she asked, wiping her hands on a towel. I watched her eyes scan the paper. For a split second, barely noticeable, her smile faltered. Then it returned, breezy as ever. "Oh," she said, laughing lightly. "That's not ours. That must have been for one of the execs. They probably charged it under the agencies tab. Happens all the time." I waited. She didn't elaborate. Just seemed specific. I said, "Private suite. Champagne. Dessert for two." "Tom," she said, stepping closer and cupping my arm. "It's nothing. Honestly, you probably picked up the wrong receipt. Those things get shuffled around all the time. You don't think I'd be dumb enough to book something like that on a company card, do you?" She laughed again, and this time I forced a chuckle. I wanted to believe her. But later that night, when she fell asleep with her back to me, phone screen glowing quietly on her nightstand, locked, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I didn't know what I was looking for yet. But for the first time in years, I felt like maybe I needed to start paying closer attention. In the days after the dinner, the receipt stayed in my desk drawer. I didn't bring it up again. Neither did she. But it lived there like an uninvited guest, just beneath a stack of paperwork, whispering questions I didn't want answers to. Yet, maybe I wasn't ready to admit what I was starting to suspect. Maybe part of me still wanted to believe her story, that it was a mix-up, a harmless clerical hiccup, nothing more. But something inside me had shifted. A gear turned, slow and grinding. I'd been handed a puzzle piece I wasn't supposed to see. And once you see one piece, you start looking for others. And I started seeing them everywhere. It wasn't sudden, more like a slow unraveling of things I'd accepted without thought. Jade had been coming home late more often, client dinners, team drinks, networking events. At first, I chalked it up to her career. She was good at what she did. Driven, sharp, ambitious. But now I lost track of time hit differently. Every new perfume she wore made me wonder where it came from and why I never smelled it before. She'd changed her phone settings too. Used to be she'd leave it on the kitchen counter when she showered or while we watched TV. Now it never left her side. Not even in the bathroom. And it was always on silent. No more buzzing, no little notification pings. Just silence. I caught myself staring at it one night as it sat between us on the couch, face down, as though it were hiding something. Maybe it was. Conversations between us had thinned out like old paint, still there, but lacking depth. She used to talk about her campaigns, her coworkers, her day. Lately, it was surface-level, safe topics, recycled phrases, like she was filling time until she could move on to something else. One evening, as she told me about a team-building trip scheduled for the weekend, I asked her which hotel they'd be staying at. She paused just for a beat, then said, "The Harborview." I nodded. Later that night, when she was in the shower, I checked her email on our shared desktop. We hadn't logged out in weeks. I searched Harborview. Nothing. No reservation, no itinerary. But there were 2 past bookings for a different place, the Crane Hotel, a boutique spot downtown. One booking was from 2 months ago. Another from 6 weeks back. Both for weekends. Both under her name. She never mentioned the Crane. I wanted to believe there was an explanation. That the agency booked it for clients. That she'd stayed there for a conference. That somehow this all lined up. But the more I tried to connect the dots, the more the picture distorted. I wasn't just missing puzzle pieces anymore. I was starting to realize someone else had rearranged the entire image. The next week, she came home unusually cheerful, humming as she unpacked takeout boxes. I watched her from the hallway. Something about the way she moved felt rehearsed. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it was like she was performing a version of herself. One she thought I wanted to see. She handed me a carton of sesame noodles and asked how my day was. "Same as yesterday," I said. "How about you?" "Oh, great," she said, her eyes flicking to her phone. "We nailed the client pitch." I nodded. "That the same client from the dinner?" She hesitated. "Which dinner?" "The one with the Dom Perignon." A tight smile. "Right?" "Yeah, that one." She changed the subject. That night, I lay in bed pretending to sleep. She scrolled through her phone for over an hour, screen dimmed, eyes darting. When she finally set it down, I counted until her breathing slowed. Then I slipped out of bed and walked to the kitchen. I opened the drawer where I'd stashed the receipt. Still there. Still crisp. I stared at it for a long time. Then I took out a notebook and started writing dates. Dinners, trips, late returns. I pulled up my email and searched receipts, calendar reminders, old messages. I checked her joint credit card history, her work calendar, anything I could access without a password. And slowly a pattern emerged. Every 2 or 3 weeks, she had a client dinner or overnight strategy retreat. On those nights, she always left around 6:30 and came home the next morning saying she was too tired to drive home. Always with the same explanation. I cross-checked the dates with the Crane's booking confirmation emails. They matched. 3 trips. Same hotel. Same check-in and check-out times. No expense reports filed on her agency portal. I checked twice. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen. Something was happening. Something real. And the longer I stayed silent, the more it felt like I was letting it happen. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. Not because I was afraid of her response, but because I wasn't sure what I'd do with it. Would I believe another excuse? Would I forgive her? Was I even ready for the truth? Instead, I started paying attention. I noticed she wore the same pair of heels on those nights, the ones she called her client K** lures. I noticed she'd reapply lipstick in the car before she left, and she always came home with her hair neatly brushed but her earrings missing. She never explained that part. I noticed she kept a second bag in her trunk, a leather one I'd never seen before. And I noticed that every time she said it's just work, it sounded less and less like the truth. The puzzle wasn't complete yet, but the picture was coming into focus. And it looked nothing like the life I thought we had. It happened on a Tuesday. Nothing special about the day itself, gray skies, slow emails, a grocery run that ended with me forgetting half of what I went for. Jade was already home when I walked in. She smiled like everything was fine, asked about dinner, and mentioned she'd be working late from home because of a tight client turnaround. She showered after we ate, and I noticed she brought her tablet into the bathroom, a habit she'd picked up in the last few months. At first, I thought nothing of it. But that night, she forgot to lock the screen. I don't know what made me check. I wish I could say it was accidental, that I just glanced at the glowing screen and something caught my eye. But that would be a lie. The truth is, I picked it up the second I heard the water running. My hands moved before my brain could second guess. It was already open to a message thread. The name at the top made my stomach sink, Darren R. Her boss. I didn't expect what I found. I thought maybe there'd be flirty texts or maybe vague suggestions enough to confirm what I suspected. What I didn't expect were the videos. Actual clips sent back and forth like souvenirs from a life I didn't know she had. The first was of them sharing a private toast in a hotel room, same decor I'd seen in the Crane's promotional photos. She was laughing, glass in hand, wearing the green dress from the dinner party. He leaned in and kissed her cheek. She didn't flinch. Another video showed them at dinner, seated in a candlelit booth, his hand resting lightly on her thigh. They weren't hiding. They looked like a couple. I scrolled further. There were messages, long ones. Plans for another weekend away. Coordinating excuses. Him telling her she was the only thing that made the job worth it. Her saying she was tired of pretending at home. They talked about me like I was background noise. An obstacle. A convenience. That was the word she used, convenience. I hate the guilt, she wrote in one message. But he's comfortable and it's complicated. I stared at that sentence so long the screen dimmed. I didn't feel rage. Not at first. What I felt was weightless. Like someone had pulled the floor out from under me and I was still waiting to hit the ground. My pulse didn't spike. My hands didn't shake. It was just quiet. Inside and out. Even the sound of the shower running in the next room felt far away, like it belonged to another house, another version of my life. I closed the tablet, placed it back exactly where I found it, and walked out to the backyard. The air was cool, the kind that hints at a coming storm. I stood there for a while, staring at the fence, listening to the wind move through the branches. And I knew. It was over. Not just the affair. The marriage. Everything we'd built. The home we'd painted together, the vacations we'd taken, the lazy Sunday mornings with coffee and music, they all belonged to a life that no longer existed. A version of us that died quietly while I was still trying to believe it was alive. I didn't confront her. What was there to say? I'd already seen everything. Words weren't going to fix this. Apologies couldn't reach that deep. And even if she tried, even if she begged, I didn't have it in me to carry her excuses. Not anymore. Instead, I made a decision. I would leave. Not dramatically. Not with shouting or scenes or ultimatums. But silently. Carefully. Completely. The next morning, I got up early, made coffee, and watched her move around the kitchen like nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek before she left for work. I nodded. Smiled. Inside, something had gone cold. The next few days, I played along. I answered her texts. We watched TV together. I even made dinner one night, spaghetti, her favorite. She said it tasted like it used to. I smiled again. But every moment I was detaching. Quietly. Strategically. I started backing up files. Noticed which of our accounts were shared and which weren't. Checked the deed to the house. Opened a private savings account and began moving small amounts every few days. Not enough to draw attention. I stopped asking questions. Stopped looking for more proof. I didn't need any more. And somehow in that silence, the lack of confrontation, the absence of drama, I found a strange kind of power. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was planning. I watched her come and go with a kind of detached clarity. I noticed how often she smiled at her phone. How often she wore perfume on days she said she'd be in meetings all afternoon. I noticed how she never noticed me noticing. And that said everything. I began gathering the pieces of my life, the parts that were still mine. Documents. Keepsakes. Things that mattered to me, things I would take. Each night, a little more disappeared from the drawers. From the closet. From the garage. She never asked. Maybe she didn't care. Or maybe she was too distracted, too wrapped up in the fantasy she'd built with Darren. Whatever the reason, her silence gave me space to execute mine. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to explain. I was just going to vanish. There's a particular kind of silence that comes when you've made up your mind. Not the anxious silence of waiting or the loud silence of heartbreak. This was different. It was clean. Sharp. Like a knife that had already done its job and was now just resting quietly beside the wound. That was the silence I lived in after I found those messages. Every move I made after that wasn't fueled by emotion, not anger, not sorrow. It was something colder. More focused. There was no more wondering if I was imagining things. No more hoping things would go back to how they used to be. The picture had cleared and all that was left was the logistics of my exit. I started with the essentials. The house, for example, it was legally under my name. Something we'd agreed on early in our marriage when we bought it since my credit was stronger. At the time, it had seemed irrelevant. We were a team. Now, it felt like the one smart move I'd made without knowing it. I double-checked the paperwork just to be sure: mortgage, title, insurance. All confirmed. I also reviewed our shared accounts and immediately began closing what I could. I opened a new checking account and redirected my paycheck. Moved automatic payments. Canceled joint subscriptions. Every evening after Jade fell asleep, sometimes beside me, sometimes in the guest room when she claimed she had work calls late into the night, I sat on the couch with my laptop, quietly severing the threads that tied us together. It took longer than I thought. 8 years of marriage left a wide paper trail. Joint memberships, shared logins, tangled bills, and overlapping routines. I moved slowly, carefully, deleting my presence from what used to be ours and making it mine again. I didn't pack boxes all at once. That would have raised suspicion. Instead, I took items piece by piece. A couple of sweaters one night. Some old books the next. My camera gear. My high school watch. One by one, they disappeared into my car trunk and ended up in a storage unit I rented across town. I moved out like smoke. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did and didn't care. That realization hurt more than I expected. Not because I wanted her to catch me, I didn't. But because the fact that she didn't meant she had truly stopped seeing me. I was becoming invisible in real time and she didn't blink. One evening I pulled into the storage lot after dark, lifted the roll-up door on Unit 127 and stared at the growing pile inside. My pile. A sad little monument to a life being dismantled. Folded clothes. Kitchen knives. Framed photos of my parents. The copy of East of Eden I'd kept since college. This was what was left of me. But there was freedom in that too. With every item I placed in that unit, I felt a little lighter. A little more mine. Eventually, I rented a one-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. Nothing special, just clean, simple, and most importantly, mine. No shared closets. No memory-soaked furniture. No hidden truths in the air. Just a fresh start with new locks and unfamiliar walls. The landlord asked if I was relocating for work. Something like that, I said. I spent 3 weeks preparing. Long days pretending. Quiet nights detaching. I bought a new phone and moved my contacts. Changed my emergency information at work. Set up a private P.O. box. I wasn't just leaving the marriage. I was leaving the version of me that tolerated it. Each step was deliberate. Each move irreversible. Back at the house, Jade never asked why my drawer had fewer socks. Why my side of the closet looked thinner. Why the bookshelf was missing half its titles. She was distracted by Darren, by work, by whatever fantasy life she'd built that didn't include me. Sometimes I wondered if she already knew. If part of her was just waiting for me to say it, to call it what it was and free her from the lie we were both pretending to live. But I didn't give her that. I wouldn't give her the drama or the scene or the tears. She didn't deserve closure from me. Only absence. So I planned my final day. I chose a Sunday early morning. She was supposed to be at a yoga class with a friend and I knew I'd have at least an hour alone. I loaded the last few bags into the car the night before, essentials I'd kept hidden in the garage. I checked the house one final time. My toothbrush gone. My suits gone. My shoes by the door gone. Everything I needed was already at the apartment. Before I left, I stood in the living room looking around at what was left, the carefully curated decorations she'd picked out, the photos on the wall, the color-coded bookshelf that looked untouched. It was all so staged, like a showroom model of a happy life. I walked into the kitchen, took the house keys from my ring, and dropped them in the ceramic bowl by the door. The sound was louder than I expected. Final. I didn't leave a note. There was nothing to explain. She'd know why. I closed the door behind me, walked to the car, and drove away without looking back. No one stopped me. No last-minute texts. No tears. Just the quiet hum of the engine and the sun rising slowly in the rearview. Later that evening, I got a single message from her. Did you forget to take out the trash? The house smells weird. That was it? No, where are you? No, why did you leave? No panic. Just a complaint about the house being quiet and inconvenient. That message said more than any confrontation could have. It told me exactly who she was, and confirmed I'd made the right choice. The first morning in the apartment was quiet, too quiet. Not in the eerie, unfamiliar way most people describe when they move to a new place. The silence felt earned. It was deliberate, controlled. The only sound was the soft buzz of the fridge and the occasional creak of the heating pipes. No footsteps. No phone buzzing from the bathroom. No half-hearted "babe, can you grab my keys?" echoing down the hall. Just me. I made coffee and stood by the window looking out over the street below. A dog walker passed by, bundled in a puffy coat, earbuds in. A couple jogged across the intersection, laughing as they tried to beat the red light. Normal life. None of them knew that a few miles away I had vanished from another life without a word. It felt surreal. I should have been nervous. Should have felt guilty. But instead, I felt like I could breathe again. Like my chest, compressed for months under the weight of pretending, was finally expanding. No more navigating lies. No more watching her from the corner of my eye waiting to catch the next inconsistency. No more hoping she'd notice I was fading. Jade didn't call that day. Didn't text either. Maybe she thought I was working late. Maybe she was too wrapped up in her new routine to notice. Maybe she had just assumed I was off doing something else, a detail in the background of her life she could revisit when convenient. The first full day turned into two. Still nothing. By the third, I got a message, a short one. Hey, haven't heard from you. All good. That was it. No worry. No urgency. Just a vague check-in, like we were distant friends instead of husband and wife. I stared at it for a few minutes before setting the phone down. I didn't reply. If she wanted to find me, she could try harder. If she really cared, she wouldn't need breadcrumbs. She'd noticed the shoes missing from the closet. The quiet hum of a fridge now unshared. The lack of dishes in the sink, the cooler side of the bed no longer disturbed. Instead, her next message 2 days later was about bills. The water company called. Did you change something? Again, I said nothing. I had changed a lot. I'd rerouted utilities. Forwarded mail to the P.O. box. Changed my billing info, updated my insurance, even signed a new lease at my firm's satellite office closer to the apartment. Everything I'd left behind was hers to deal with now. She was still trying to live in the shell of the marriage like nothing had changed. Maybe she believed that if she avoided asking the big question, "Where are you?" she wouldn't have to face the answer. But I was already gone. Not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. I'd left our marriage long before I packed a single bag. That part just made it official. A week passed. Then, too, the messages came less frequently. First it was about logistics. Do you still want your mail forwarded? Can you send the HOA login info? Then it turned to confusion. I don't get why you're doing this. Are you okay? Please talk to me. I ignored each one. It wasn't silence out of spite. It was silence out of clarity. For the first time in years, I was finally choosing myself. Not reacting, not fixing, not compromising for the sake of peace that never lasted. I wasn't going to be her emotional safety net while she juggled loyalty with Darren and convenience with me. Let her feel what absence really meant. Let her sit in the stillness and wonder where the backup plan went. Still, I kept tabs, not obsessively, but enough to stay informed. Through a mutual friend, I learned that Jade had told people I was taking time to figure things out. She downplayed it, said I was on a work retreat or focusing on mental wellness. She crafted a narrative that kept her safe from questions. That was always her SK*LL, keeping the surface smooth no matter how deep the cracks ran beneath it. What she didn't tell them, what she likely didn't admit to herself, was that I'd left because of her. Not because of stress. Not because of a rough patch. but because she betrayed me and worse, thought I'd never figure it out. I could have exposed her. I could have sent the screenshot TS. Told our friends. Showed her family the videos. Ruined Darren's job and her reputation in one swipe. But I didn't. Because that would have made this about revenge. And I wasn't leaving to punish her. I was leaving to protect myself. From the slow erosion of trust. From the quiet humiliation. From the suffocating cycle of questioning everything she said, every time she smiled at her phone, every night she turned away in bed. The day she finally called, really called, I let it ring. Then it rang again. A voicemail. Tom, please? Just, I don't know what's happening. I don't know where you are. If this is about the work stuff, we can talk. We can fix it. Just, I don't understand. Please call me. Her voice cracked at the end. Still, I didn't respond. Because we weren't going to fix it. Because I didn't want to talk. And because she did understand. She just didn't want to admit it. I wasn't angry anymore. Not even hurt. What I felt was distance. A clean, unbridgeable gap between who we were and who I was now. She wasn't the woman I married. And I wasn't the man who tolerated being lied to and gaslit in his own home. So I stayed quiet. I made dinner. Read a book. Took a walk to the corner store and bought myself a plant, a small cactus I named Miles because it reminded me of how far I'd come. Later that night, I sat on the apartment balcony watching the lights flicker in the buildings around me. I thought about the last 8 years. The good, the bad, the ordinary. They felt like another lifetime. And for the first time since I left the house, I allowed myself to say it out loud. I'm free. Weeks passed. Her messages tapered off, not completely, but enough to notice a change in tone. At first they were pleas, then questions, and now they turned into something more mundane. Utility bills. HOA fees. Things she'd never bothered with when we were together. Things she now had to manage alone. She never said the word divorce. Not once. I think part of her believed this was a long time out, that I'd eventually come back once I'd cooled off or processed things. But the reality was settling in slowly like fog creeping into a familiar room. I knew the exact moment it hit her. It was the first voicemail in which her voice was flat. Not emotional. Not angry. Just tired. I get it, she said. You're not coming back. I messed up. There was a pause, then a quiet sigh before she hung up. She'd never been one to admit fault easily. It didn't bring me joy hearing her break like that. But it did give me a sense of closure. Confirmation that the decision I made wasn't only heard, but felt. I'd settled into a rhythm by then. My studio apartment wasn't much, a couch that doubled as a guest bed, a tiny kitchen with mismatched plates, and the cactus, Miles, still holding on like a champ. But it was mine. All of it. Every piece. There wasn't a single drawer I had to share, no phantom scent in the closet, no silence filled with suspicion. I got a dog from a local rescue, a quiet older mutt with sleepy eyes and a graying muzzle. I named him Benny. He didn't ask questions, didn't press for explanations. He just curled up at my feet and stayed. Loyal. Present. That was enough. One day Jade messaged and asked if we could meet for coffee. I almost said no. But something about the wording, just 5 minutes, no drama, please, made me agree. We met at a small cafe halfway between our old house and my new place. She showed up first. I recognized her immediately, though something had changed. She looked thinner. Tired in a way makeup couldn't hide. Hey, she said, voice small. Hi. We sat. For a few seconds, neither of us said a word. Then she folded her hands and said, I just wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. I know I already said that, but I mean it. I thought what I had with him was exciting. I thought I deserved more. But all I did was destroy something real. I didn't say anything. She nodded as if she expected that. I'm not asking you to come back. I know you won't. I just wanted to look you in the eye and tell you that I know I was wrong. I looked at her, at this person I once thought I'd grow old with, and realized I didn't hate her. I didn't feel much of anything. Just distance, a kind of peace that only comes after the storm has passed and the wreckage no longer scares you. I hope you figure things out, I said. She smiled, sad but genuine. I hope you already have. And with that, we stood, nodded, and left in opposite directions. She reached out a few more times over the next couple weeks. A photo of our dog from before the split. A song we used to like. An article she thought I'd enjoy. I didn't reply. It wasn't out of cruelty, just self-preservation. If I cracked the door open even a little, I knew she'd try to walk through it. Through mutual friends, I heard she'd been forced to downsize. The house was too much. The utilities, the repairs, the responsibility, all things she'd never had to shoulder alone. Apparently, Darren left the company not long after I disappeared. No scandal. Just pursuing other opportunities. With him went the perks, the dinners, the business trips, the false sense of power. Jade's texts finally stopped. Meanwhile, life moved on for me. I started working at a new firm, something smaller but more flexible. The team was great, the work meaningful. Benny became my shadow, trailing behind me everywhere. We fell into our own routines, coffee and walks in the morning, long drives on the weekends, quiet nights with old records playing in the background. I met new people. Not romantically at first, I wasn't ready. But friendships. Neighbors. Conversations with depth. The kind that reminded me I was still capable of connection, just not under the weight of deceit. I never got some big cinematic ending. No explosive confrontation or tearful apology that healed everything. What I got was better, a slow, quiet reclaiming of who I was. Piece by piece. And in that silence, I found something I hadn't felt in years. Peace.